Hello and welcome to the Dailies. Today we look at how the trade framework between China and the US was received by global commentators. That's as the two countries seek to de-escalate tensions in spite of America's unpredictability and alongside another trade war with Canada. Javier Milei wins the Argentinian midterm elections in a test of his political and economic reform. And finally, the implementation of the Gaza peace plan continues to make the news rounds amid the fragility of the ceasefire. We'll start with the Chinese media, which framed the new trade framework with the US as pragmatic progress, easing tensions but not a final deal. Reports generally stressed China's steady, principled stance and emphasized phase-based solutions. Chinese press covered Trump's Asia tour as well, underscoring China's view of itself as a key regional actor and suggests a cautious optimism about reduced bilateral tensions, while signaling that China remains alert to US moves and will defend its interests. Generally, the coverage underlined a sense of relief at the de-escalation, but remains watchful of US unpredictability. Global Times revealed discussions covered US Section 301 measures, tariff suspensions, fentanyl-related cooperation, agricultural trade, and export controls. Also, Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng stressed mutual benefit and stability, urging cooperation based on respect and equality. The piece also highlights the US delegation's tough stance, while China remained firm in defending its interests. It quotes analysts who say the productive talks lay a foundation for the upcoming leaders' meeting at the APEC in South Korea. American media was also dominated by the news of this de-escalation. Major US media broadly framed it as a strategic pause rather than a breakthrough, positive but fragile. Outlets highlighted that the framework eases economic uncertainty and may boost markets, while cautioning that deep structural disputes remain unresolved. Commentators stressed the deal reflects mutual economic necessity, not a full reconciliation. The Washington Post's editorial board described the new US-China trade framework as a temporary truce, not a lasting breakthrough. While tariffs were paused and China's rare earth embargo delayed for a year, the paper warns this should not lull Washington into complacency. The editorial urges policymakers to urgently diversify rare earth mineral supply chains, reducing reliance on Beijing for critical defense and tech components. It also calls for a crash effort to secure alternative sources to prevent future blackmail. Though markets may welcome short-term stability, deep mistrust persists, making long-term decoupling likely. The article concludes a durable US strategy must focus less on tariff battles and more on supply chain resilience to reduce strategic vulnerability and economic coercion. The Economist examines how Xi Jinping has grown more assertive ahead of his first meeting in 6 years with Donald Trump. Apparently, an analysis of over 14,000 of Xi's speeches since 2013 reveals a leader increasingly confident in China's strength and global influence. Terms like strong, country, technology, and artificial intelligence have indeed surged in frequency, reflecting his focus on technological dominance and national power. Meanwhile, words such as hope, understand, and discussion have declined, signaling a more authoritarian and top-down tone. The piece warns that Xi's rising confidence could verge on hubris, making him a formidable counterpart for Trump. The meeting will test how the US navigates negotiations with an emboldened Chinese leader, projecting global ambition. Another major story dominated headlines west of the Atlantic is Argentina's midterm elections and Javier Milei's victory. Milei's performance was dissected in Buenos Aires Times as a clear electoral endorsement of his economic experiment, despite its costs. The editorial frames the vote as a political turning point rather than a surprise. Milei once again exceeded expectations, securing over 40% support and consolidating his power in Congress. This, of course, expanded mandate gives him greater room to push austerity and deregulation, backed by warm signals from Washington. But the real story, the piece argues, is the collapse of Peronism's strategic direction. The article concludes that without rapid renewal and leadership, Peronism risks fading ahead of 2027. American media covered the Argentinian midterm election and Javier Milei's decisive win, framing it as both a domestic mandate and a geopolitical signal. The Wall Street Journal examines the victory, emphasizing Milei's close alignment with Donald Trump, whose administration tied U.S. financial support, about $20 billion, in a recent currency swap, and further backing to Milei's electoral success. The piece also highlights what President Trump made clear. If Milei wins, we're staying with him. If he doesn't win, we're gone. Of course, this victory, surpassing 40% of the vote, strengthens Milei's veto power in Congress, bolsters investor confidence, and pressures Washington and the IMF about his austerity program's durability. The piece also argues Milei's political survival is intertwined with U.S. support, and sustaining this partnership will be critical to advancing his radical free market agenda amid ongoing domestic hardship. American media continue to cover the latest episode of President Trump's trade tensions with Canada. The New York Times examines Canada's diplomatic strategy in its latest conflict with Donald Trump over a controversial Ontario advertisement using audio from Ronald Reagan. Angered, Trump halted trade talks and announced new tariffs, prompting swift action from Ontario to withdraw the ad. According to the piece, Prime Minister Mark Carney has adopted a pragmatic approach: avoid escalation, remove irritants, and pursue trade diversification, particularly in Asia. The analysis highlights what experts argue, that Canada is relying on U.S. industry's backlash against tariffs to pressure Trump to ease tensions. While some critics view Carney's stance as too conciliatory, supporters see it as a calculated long-term strategy to safeguard Canada's economic interests without personalizing the dispute. On the back of this U.S.-Canada trade crisis, the Financial Times examines Donald Trump's claim that Ronald Reagan supported tariffs, contrasting their sharply different trade philosophies. The piece contends Reagan was a committed free trader, celebrated open markets, and warned against protectionism. Though he used tariffs sparingly to protect key industries during temporary shocks, Trump, by contrast, has turned tariffs into a central economic weapon, applying broad and sustained measures to pressure trade partners and to generate revenue. The piece also includes a graph tracing the progression of Trump's tariffs from 2018 to 2025, showing their expansion from narrow sectoral action to sweeping levies on steel, autos, agriculture, and technology. Now, this escalation illustrates how Trump transformed tariffs from exceptional tools into long-term strategy, marking a clear, as the report concludes, the departure from Reagan's cautious and limited approach. On the Gaza peace plan and its implementation, the press continued to cover the search and recovery of the remains of the dead Israeli hostages in Gaza. Outlets in Israel and the Arab world, and also internationally, reported on the developments, including Israel's permitting Hamas to enter IDF-held areas of Gaza to search for dead hostages. The Times of Israel followed the details of a significant development in the hostage crisis, which is an Egyptian technical team has indeed entered Gaza Strip with Israel's approval to help recover the bodies of 13 slain hostages. The report explains that Benjamin Netanyahu personally authorized the move, signaling growing urgency. Intelligence shared by Israel and Hamas is guiding the search, and this step reflects the indeed fragile nature of the ceasefire and the intense political and humanitarian stakes surrounding the hostage issue, as Israel balances pressure tactics with maintaining international support. Israel Hayom reveals growing skepticism among Gulf states towards Donald Trump's $70 billion Gaza reconstruction plan. Qatar, United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia are conditioning financial support on Hamas's complete disarmament, exclusion from governance and major Palestinian Authority reforms. They also demand guarantees of Israeli compliance with the peace deal. Analysts note Gulf donors want credible guarantees to prevent renewed conflict. And the piece concludes that while Egypt plans to host a reconstruction conference, the lack of trust between parties and unresolved political questions threaten the plan's viability, placing Trump's post-war vision under strain. And we'll end with a Telegraph, which details the first public confirmation of a relationship between Katy Perry and Justin Trudeau. The pair were photographed leaving Crazy Horse in Paris after celebrating Perry's 41st birthday, walking hand in hand, as you can see, in what appeared to be a carefully staged or stage-managed appearance. This follows months of speculation fueled by earlier sightings in Montreal and intimate yacht photos. The piece frames their relationship against Trudeau's recent political exit and Perry's high-profile personal life, portraying the couple as both glamorous and strategic in managing public attention. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.